Elia Martell didn't get to live a long life since it was cut short when she was only around 26. When any character looks back to remember Elia, they only have kind words to say, but she didn't live the easiest life. From the moment she was born, it was clear things would be challenging for her. Her mother was a princess of Dorne and had difficulties with previous childbirths. Her firstborn and heir, Oberyn Martell, came out fine, but her 2 children after him died in infancy. Elia was the 4th to be born and came out 1 month premature. Her older brother Oberyn was sure she would also die in infancy, like her 2 older brothers that she would never meet, but he was wrong. Elia survived, but not without complications. She was very delicate and her health would always remain fragile. A year after her birth, the Princess of Dorne would have 1 more child, a healthy son named Oberyn. Oberyn didn't have a chance to grow up with his younger siblings because of the 10-year age gap between them, but Elia and Oberyn would be very close to one another. Oberyn claims they were inseparable. They all would care for each other deeply, despite how different their personalities were. All 3 of the Martell kids were smart, but in their own way. Oberyn was cautious, planning carefully, weighing all his options. We know how rash and unpredictable Oberyn was, but he was also very intelligent. Out of an eagerness to learn, he went to the Citadel and was able to forge 6 links of a maester's chain before growing bored of the place. This isn't some simple task. 6 links means complete mastery of 6 different subjects. While her life wasn't as exciting and adventurous as her brother's, Elia, with her clever, sweet wit, remained confined in the Martell's home of Sunspear. Her health didn't allow her to travel much, but at around the age of 15, when it was time for Elia and Oberyn to find appropriate marriage candidates, Elia would finally leave Dorne for the first time. The Princess of Dorne traveled with her 2 younger children to the southwest kingdoms of Westeros in hopes of brokering a match. 6 different locations scattered between 3 kingdoms. They went to Starfall, the home of House Dane and Dorne, the Arbor, an island where House Redwyne ruled in the Reach, the large city of Old Town, where an ancient and powerful family called the Hightowers rule, also in the Reach. They sailed to a group of islands nearby called the Shield Islands in the Reach, before making their way to the Westerlands for their final 2 stops. They went to Craighall and then finally Casterly Rock, the Lannisters' home. In the 3rd book, A Storm of Swords, towards its end, Oberyn tells Tyrion the story before his death. Elia found it all exciting. She was of that age, and her delicate health had never permitted her much travel. I preferred to amuse myself by mocking my sister's suitors. There was Little Lord Lazy Eye, Squire Squish Lips, one I named The Whale That Walks, that sort of thing. The only one who was even halfway presentable was young Baelor Hightower, a pretty lad, and my sister was half in love with him, until he had the misfortune to fart once in our presence. I promptly named him Baelor Breakwind, and after that, Elia couldn't look at him without laughing. I was a monstrous young fellow. Someone should have sliced out my vile tongue. Either from Oberyn's insults, or their mother just not finding them worthy, none of these men would be betrothed to Elia, even though Baelor Hightower, who Oberyn nicknamed Baelor Breakwind, would grow up to be very respectable and admired throughout the realm, even earning a new nickname, Baelor Brightsmile. Tyrion wonders how different things would be if Elia had married him. But during their last stop at Casterly Rock, the Princess of Dorne was very interested in the Lannister twins, Cersei and Jaime. When she was younger, Elia and Oberyn's mother, yeah, I know, I wish her name was given too, but I'm just gonna have to keep calling her their mother or the Princess of Dorne. But anyways, she, along with Tywin's wife, Joanna Lannister, served as ladies-in-waiting to the Queen Rhaella Targaryen, the Mad King's sister wife. The 3 girls became close friends, but when the Princess of Dorne visited Casterly Rock, Joanna just recently died giving birth to Tyrion, so instead their mother just met with Tywin about the betrothals. He turned down the offer to have Cersei marry Oberyn, claiming she was to marry Rhaegar Targaryen, and also refused to have Jaime marry Elia, instead offering Tyrion, which was an insult because of his deformity. So the Martells went home empty-handed. But to Tywin's surprise, 6 years later, the Princess of Dorne met with Rhaella Targaryen and successfully brokered a marriage between Elia and Rhaegar Targaryen. This all took place in 279 AC, and by this point in the story, the Mad King absolutely hated and feared Tywin, who for whatever reason kept him around as his hand. So he rejected Tywin's offer to have Cersei marry Rhaegar. The Mad King wanted Rhaegar to marry someone of high Valyrian birth, but after none could be found in Essos, I guess he lost interest about who his heir would marry after that. Because that was the kind of man he was. He would have the most elaborate schemes in his head, but would never put in the effort and quickly lose interest. By 280 AC, they were married, and Elia would quickly get pregnant. Elia didn't have to suffer living in the same castle as the Mad King, who was kinda racist towards Dornish. Dorne had always been a little secluded from the rest of the Seven Kingdoms, and once had a long, bloody feud with the Targaryens. The Martells and Targaryens did make up through double marriages, but the Mad King was just as dumb as he was crazy. The newlyweds would live in Dragonstone, the Targaryens' nearby island, where the heir customarily lives until it is his time to rule. But this marriage wouldn't last very long. They would only be together for a couple of years. A marriage with the Crown Prince, the heir to the Iron Throne, would normally be every girl's dream in this world, but it would be the reason for Elia's death. Everything was fine and normal in the beginning. It was an arranged marriage, so you can't expect them to fall madly in love the moment they set eyes on one another. But they were fond of each other. There was a lot to like about the kind and gentle Elia, while the entire realm admired Rhaegar because he was the perfect human. Their first trial as a couple came after the birth of their first child, a daughter they named Rhaenys. Elia's frail and delicate body made the birth difficult for her, and she was bedridden for 6 months afterwards. But she survived, and together they took their newborn daughter to King's Landing to present it to the king and queen. The Mad King wouldn't touch his first grandchild, claiming her to smell Dornish, while Rhaella embraced her warmly. Rhaegar's father's behavior was to be expected. He didn't even attend their wedding. Aerys and his son were never close, but how could you be with a man so deranged? But by 280 AC, their relationship was almost as bad as it was between Aerys and Tywin. The Mad King was afraid of Rhaegar, but it wasn't just because he was paranoid about everything. Half his court was a Rhaegar supporter because of how poor of a ruler Aerys was, and how he kept spiraling out of control. The young Targaryen Martell family would return home to Dragonstone and go back to baby making, since Elia was all healed by 281 AC. In this same year would be when the infamous tourney at Harrenhal would take place in the Riverlands. Rhaegar, who took no pleasure in fighting, or much pleasure in anything, decided to enlist in the tilts, in what would be the greatest tourney within the story. All the most powerful lords would attend and the greatest fighters participate. This convinced crazy old Aerys that Rhaegar was rounding up all possible allies to usurp the throne from his father. So the Mad King decided to finally leave the Red Keep, something he never did, to make sure no one was plotting against him. Anytime Rhaegar set his mind to something, he would accomplish it. He was able to defeat 2 of the best fighters in the realm, Barristan Selmy and Arthur Dayne, and win the joust. When it was time for him to crown his Queen of Love and Beauty, he rode past his wife Elia and handed a crown of blue roses to Lyanna Stark, Ned Stark's little sister. The small folk and nobles alike all loved Rhaegar and would cheer louder for him than anyone else, but the moment he chose Lyanna over Elia, all of Harrenhal went silent. She was betrothed to Robert Baratheon, but he just laughed this off, saying it was a compliment. But the people that truly knew Robert, like Ned, knew this sparked his hatred for Rhaegar. It would be Lyanna and Ned's older brother Brandon Stark to lose his control, believing this to be an insult on his sister. He had to be restrained from doing anything rash. This was completely out of Rhaegar's character to dishonor his wife like that. Something must have made him fall deeply for Lyanna, and he did this while his poor wife was pregnant. We don't know how Elia reacted to this, and probably never will know. Viserys would tell Daenerys the story since she wasn't even born when all this was going down, but of course he would be biased. He made Rhaegar out to look like a hero and Elia a bad wife. But Barristan Selmy would finally tell her the truth in the 3rd book. Daenerys asks him, if Rhaegar had been happy in his wife, he would not have needed the Stark girl. Perhaps so, your grace. Whitebeard paused a moment. But I am not certain it was in Rhaegar to be happy. You make him sound so sour, Dany protested. Not sour, no, but there was a melancholy to Prince Rhaegar. A sense. The old man hesitated again. Say it, she urged. A sense of doom. He was born in grief, my queen, and that shadow hung over him all his days. While back on Dragonstone, their second child, Aegon, would be born in 282 AC. This birth would almost kill Elia. Their maester told Rhaegar that she would not survive another pregnancy. Instead of sticking around on the island with his family, Rhaegar would decide to ditch them and go on a cross-country horse ride with his close friends. He would never return to his family. He would meet with Lyanna and run away with her to Dorne, of all places. When Brandon Stark demanded justice for what he believed to be a kidnapping of his sister, the Mad King had him killed along with his father, Lord Rickard Stark. This would set off Robert's rebellion. To have the Dornish support the Targaryens, the Mad King had Elia and her 2 small children brought to King's Landing as a sort of hostage. Rhaegar left 3 Kingsguard members to guard over Lyanna in what would be called the Tower of Joy in Dorne. While he left in 283 AC to take command of the Targaryen army, he faced off with Robert Baratheon and was killed. Elia's nightmare of a marriage was cut short, but her tragedy wasn't over. Tywin Lannister sacked King's Landing to prove to Robert that he was his ally and not the Targaryens. He sent his men, Sir Gregor Clegane, aka the Mountain, and Sir Amory Lorch, to find and kill Elia's children, in case they would inspire future rebellions. The Mountain threw the infant Aegon against the wall and proceeded to rape and murder Elia with her son's blood still on his hands. Apparently he killed her in the same way he would kill Oberyn much later in the story. Amory Lorch would be the one to find Rhaenys under a bed and stab her over and over. Rhaegar, his wife, their children, and soon even Lyanna would all be dead. Oberyn Martell was already angry with how the Targaryens treated his little sister Elia, but it was the Lannisters that killed her. He secretly planned to align himself with Viserys and Daenerys to take down the Baratheons and Lannisters, but Viserys would get himself killed. Oberyn's whereabouts during Robert's rebellion is unknown, but it's safe to assume he was in Essos, either unaware or too far away to make it back in time to do something. He of course wanted revenge, but his older brother convinced him to be patient. Oberyn would get to kill the Mountain, well kind of, but at the cost of his own life. It'll be up to Doran to finish the quest for justice in the next book, because the show really messed up the Martell plot. Elia, similarly to her mother-in-law Rhaella, were good people who had their lives ruined by their Targaryen husbands. Elia's backstory is up there with some of the more tragic characters. Definitely some good writing by George Martin, but it does make you feel awful. Hope this video was somehow enjoyable for you. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.